Welcome back. This is the Intelligent Founder AI podcast, and I am glad you are here for the start of something a little different. Over the next 8 episodes, we are going to go deep on one topic, the decision every serious AI startup is going to face, probably more than once, and usually at the worst possible moment. That decision is how you actually pay for the compute that runs your product, not which model to use, not which framework. The physical, financial question of where your AI actually lives and who owns it, and what happens to your margins when your usage doubles. We are calling this series the AI Infrastructure Decision Framework. By the end of it, you will have a decision tree you can use, a real cost calculator, an understanding of the GPU rental market and why it matters, and a view on what NVIDIA is actually doing to the entire industry. These are not abstract concepts. These are decisions that will determine whether your unit economics ever make sense. Let me start with the framing that everything else in this series hangs on. There are 3 positions you can be in when it comes to AI infrastructure. You can build on hosted inference APIs, which means you pay OpenAI or Anthropic, or one of the cheaper alternatives per token, and you never touch a GPU yourself. You can rent GPU compute from what the industry now calls neoclouds or GPU marketplaces, meaning you get access to H100s or B200s by the hour, and you deploy your own models. Or you can buy hardware and operate it yourself, either in a data center or in your own facility. Build, rent, buy. Those are the 3 positions. Here is what most founders get wrong. They treat this as a one-time decision made at the start of a project. It is not. It is a continuous optimization problem, and the right answer changes as your traffic grows, as GPU prices shift, and as your model strategy matures. The whole point of this series is to give you a mental model that lets you move along this spectrum deliberately rather than accidentally. Now, why does this matter right now in particular? Because the economics have shifted dramatically in the last 18 months. H100 cloud rental rates fell from roughly $8 an hour in early 2023 to somewhere between $1.80 and $3.50 per hour across specialist providers in mid-2026, with spot pricing as low as $1.20 on some marketplaces. That is a 4-to-1 price compression. Simultaneously, the cost of frontier API calls has also fallen, but not uniformly. There is now a 640 times price gap between the cheapest viable LLM API option and the most expensive frontier model. That spread is enormous, and most founders are not actively managing it. At the same time, on-premises AI is making a serious comeback. Lenovo published analysis in early 2026 showing that for sustained inference workloads, owning your infrastructure can yield up to an 18 times cost advantage per million tokens compared to model-as-a-service APIs. That number sounds extreme until you work through the maths. At 10 billion tokens per month, the 3-year total cost of ownership for on-premises infrastructure can come to around £1.4 million versus $3.3 million for cloud APIs. The difference is real, and it compounds. So the decision is not obvious, and the data points all over the place depending on your workload, your team size, your compliance requirements, and your risk tolerance. That is why we need a framework rather than a rule. Here's the first principle I want you to take from this episode. The decision is driven by 3 variables: your utilization rate, your workload predictability, and your engineering capacity. If you have high sustained utilization, predictable traffic, and an engineering team that can operate infrastructure, the economics of owning your compute start to win. If any one of those 3 things is missing, you want the flexibility of renting or buying through APIs. We will come back to the exact thresholds in episode 2, but I want you to hold that triangle in mind. The second principle is about what 80% of AI spend actually is. It is inference, not training. This is a shift that happened over the last 2 years, and a lot of founders are still building their infrastructure strategy around training economics, which are completely different. When you are in production, you are running inference continuously. That is the cost that scales with your users, and that is the cost you need to optimize. Training is a one-time or periodic event. Inference is your monthly bill. The third principle, and this is important for UK founders in particular, is that your infrastructure decision is also a compliance decision. Sovereign AI is not a buzzword. If you are building for critical infrastructure, healthcare, financial services, or any regulated vertical, where your data actually goes and who has access to it is a legal requirement, not a preference. We will cover this in depth in Episode 7, but it affects your decision tree from the very first step. Here's how the next 7 episodes map out. Episode 2 is about the real economics of inference AP is, what the per-token prices actually are, how to calculate your true monthly cost, and which providers are genuinely cheap versus just cheap to start. Episode 3 goes deep on GPU rental markets. We will look at CoreWeave, Lambda, Crusoe, RunPod, the hyperscalers, and how to think about spot versus reserved versus on-demand pricing. Episode 4 is the on-premises case. When does buying hardware actually make sense? What does it cost to operate? And what is the break-even utilization threshold? Episode 5 is about the open source versus proprietary model decision, because that choice has a massive impact on your infrastructure requirements. Episode 6 is the AI FinOps playbook, which is about how you actually manage and reduce costs once you are in production. Episode 7 is sovereign AI and compliance, specifically for UK and European founders. And Episode 8 brings it all together with the full decision tree, the cost calculator walkthrough, and the NVIDIA and compute war story. This series is the foundation for building an AI product that does not get destroyed by its own infrastructure bill. So let us get into it. I will see you in Episode 2. If you want the companion spreadsheet we will be building across this series, subscribe to intelligentfounder.ai. It is free.